Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Cradle Book 12, Waybound, chapters 19 and 20. In these chapters, Zeil gets to deal the death blow to the Weeping Dragon. It's very satisfying. It does almost kill him. It comes super, super close. But he does it. And then we have an unexpected bonus that did not occur to me, you guys. Lindon gets a power-up too. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andy for commissioning this episode. Andy, if you are out there listening, what's up? I am just laughing at myself, you guys, because I have complained about how slowly I have to read this. I have nobody but myself to blame since I can't keep my mouth shut. I have to go off on a variety of different topics and then be surprised when I've run out of time. But I really have been sticking to my 1 hour length maximum that I'm supposed to have for these episodes, only after enforcing this rule with myself of spreading things out. So I guess, and just to start things off with a little info for next time, we will only be doing 2 chapters for the next episode as well, chapters 21 and 22. So that's all, once again. All right, so there is so much to talk about, but we're going to start off with Orthos. We begin chapter 19 with him thinking about how bizarre it is that he has hands, which I agree. And they can feel that Lindon's cores are totally empty and that he is unconscious. Something has definitely fucked him up. I've got to say, guys, I ended the last episode feeling genuine concern about Lindon and where he was going to wind up and whether he was going to be okay. And I feel like Charity when after his oath doubles back on him because he breaks it by accident. I was predicting all of these really upsetting potential outcomes, and it's just fine. He's just okay. He's fine, it turns out. Oh, all right. So, that said, he's still fucked up here, but when we see him later, he's all right. And Orthos is wondering if it's even possible for Lindon to die anymore because he is so linked with the Dread Gods. And I never thought of that. But, oh, damn. That would be wild. And Little Blue pulls that tank out that she came through the portal with. And it's got all of these orbs in it. Do you guys remember how last episode I was all, it would be so cool if they all had mind spirits. Also, too bad that can't happen. Dross can make temporary copies of himself, but that's not really the same thing. Guess what? They did. Basically, they did. So we don't get to find out what these are for a little bit here yet, though. I'm curious, actually, if anybody predicted what these were, but I didn't spend any time trying to figure it out. Those are sorts of things that I don't tend to bother with attempting because it just seems like I know I'm going to find out shortly, so I don't need to dedicate any brain space to that versus bigger mysteries or puzzles. So Orthos is looking at his, and it says, if his spirit broke this down for Madra or Dream Essence, the entire project would be wasted. Lindon had used materials from the Silent King to create these, not to mention irreplaceable fuel for the time-warping Grand Oath Array. Even in the heart of an apocalyptic battle, this deserved thought. Little Blue swallowed her orb whole. "Don't break it," Orthos shouted. "Control it carefully." From her wide-eyed look and the way she hurriedly took control of her internal Madra, he saw that she hadn't intended to control the process at all. She was just going to see what happened. Oh, Little Blue. Girl, you know I love you, but you are not in a position to be this fucking cavalier with shit. You have got to not do this. Oh my God. So he says, all right, good. Now let's get these to the others. And all of a sudden, Dross appears. And he's like, wait, how did I get here? Where's Lindon? And I was like, oh, it just begins to click into place exactly what is happening here. And Orthos explains that you're not the original Dross. And he's like, oh, okay, I'm a copy, I see. What are you waiting for? Pop yours in. He's looking at Orthos. And Orthos nods and begins to open his mouth to swallow it. And Dross is like, what the fuck? No. Oh my God, did you swallow it? And he turns and looks at Little Blue and she says, don't do that. Don't ever do that. Give it to me. Give it to me right now. Oh, this cracked me up, you guys. Oh my God. The idea that was not what she was supposed to do. And it like worked, you know? So him saying like, don't do it. I mean, I don't know if she didn't get the full benefit, but it seems like it did wind up working. Maybe things are different for her because she is a spirit still, but I don't know if it, you know, like because she's not technically like actually a human yet. Or did the last transformation take? It's hard to keep track once they start advancing this fast, you know? So Orthos gives him the ball and Dross drags it to the back of his head and like pushes it in the back of his head. And all of a sudden he's like, oh, damn. And he can really feel Dross, and he feels as if like he's using his eyes properly for the first time and is like, well, this is really rad. And when Orthos says, how are we supposed to tell you apart? Dross says, no need. Think of it as me projecting myself into many bodies. I'm just doing it more efficiently. And now Lindon doesn't have to be around for you to benefit from my infinite wisdom. So we just decided to make copies because making individual ones would be really time consuming. And when we develop our own individual personalities, they'll all be based on mine. And Orthos is like, well, I sure hope none of those personalities is the one where you would just sit around and quote death poetry. To which Dross is like, I thought we agreed that we were never going to talk about that ever again. I thought that was the deal that we had made with each other. You're really not having my back here, bro. And then Dross says, incoming, throw me. And so they toss the last of the copies to Mercy, Yaren, and Zeil. And I really love how Mercy is thinking that Malice would be like, absolutely do not do this. Oh my God, are you kidding me? First of all, this is permanent. So that's psychotic. Second of all, you are like just doing this in the midst of a battle. You need to be getting a surgeon to do this properly. And thirdly, this is basically a parasite. It's just going to be living off of you. You can't just let it have its own mind and then be in your body. No, we're not doing this. Mercy's like, we are though. And she just does it. And Dross, I really enjoy that she says like, hi Dross, welcome. And he starts to say, you're even nicer to me than he, and then cuts himself off with, it's a dread god, right, timing. I just enjoy the concept of how Dross, considering that these are copies, yes, but they all have his personality, as he said. What it must be like to see inside their heads like this for the first time. And he comments with Zeil how much angrier Zeil is than he expected. And when we are in Zeil's head, Dross is sort of like, hey, bruh, look, I get that you have like your personal vendetta against the Weeping Dragon. I totally respect that. But you have to know, you're not going to be the one to kill it, okay? Like, we have got our people for that, and you are the shield, and you got to be backup, and it's just not going to be the role you play. And he's really expecting some pushback and thinking that, you know, he's going to get an argument here. And instead, Zeil's just like, I don't care. Sure. I want it dead. That's literally it. Whatever I got to do to make sure that's what happens, then let's do that. And Dross is pretty gratified about this. And it's just like, all right, well, then let's fucking do it. And then we get Yeren. And she is feeling some arrogance. And you guys, I'm a little bit... So Dross says, that would be Athen's influence, or Osriel's, Osmanthus, whichever. Using his techniques won't hurt you, probably. But they might change you. I don't like that. So, okay, here's the thing. Yeren's already had her whole thing with her blood shadow and it having its own personality and the two of them merging and it being a little bit tricky for her to tell what's her feeling, what's Ruby's feeling. All of this is really like, it's traumatic in a way, you know? And I don't like that she's already been through that kind of like personality shift and almost like an invasion. And now maybe she's going to have to deal with that yet again. It just seems unfair. Everybody else, it's like they have to work through some shit. Definitely, you know, but they don't have this sort of consequence to the things they're training with and learning. It just seems like she keeps getting put in this position. And I'm like very concerned that I don't even know what I'm concerned about. It's just because like a little arrogance, it's not an inherently bad thing. It can be unattractive, but also if you can back it up, there's a part of me that's just kind of like, well, I mean, I'm not going to like argue with you about it. But what bothers me is that because Yeren isn't at like the power level that Osmanthus was, and you know, she is gifted for sure. She has reached this peak already that she shouldn't have reached until she was much older. But he was a true prodigy, and I am concerned that if she has this kind of arrogance in her system before she's gotten to a point where she can absolutely always back it up, it's going to lead to her doing some truly unwise shit. And up to now, you know, we saw her going after the fucking calling storms. I was kind of like, wow, okay. She was a lot more aggro than I expected. But it worked out. Ultimately, you know, they took him down. It worked out. But, like, what if it didn't, though? And that's the thing. Maybe part of the arrogance is coming from, like, I know it will, though, so shut up. And I want so much to, like, buy that and have that faith. But then there's a big part of me that is feeling like this is a really slippery slope. You know? I don't know. I don't know. I'm just concerned about it. I'm just saying. Jan says Athen was afraid that Osriel's inheritance would change Lindon too, which would have been wild. Like Lindon being even close to arrogant. I can't imagine what that would even be like. I'm bored says it's more like shifting her viewpoint to one like Osriel's than it is Oz overriding her personality. It doesn't really matter though. Like, either way, it's a change that is occurring due to a technique that isn't exactly voluntary. You know, I just don't like it. So, Dross for her is red. And is like, wait, what? Why the fuck am I red? And he asks her that. And she's like, dude, the fuck should I know? And he's like, all right, you know, I have to assume it's because I'm like meant to synergize with the matrix that your mind enhancements already present. But maybe you just really like red. And I kind of like that idea that she just didn't really think about it, but made him match. Because why not? And I don't really know that she would give a shit about that sort of thing, but I like it anyway. So he says, you remember that old dull memory you've been using for inspiration? I've cleaned that up for you. The image of Ethan in black armor shone in her mind, clearer than she'd actually seen it. She wondered if Dross had taken Lindon memory and put it together with hers. That's exactly what I did, and I added a bit of my own in there. I've also seen a lot more of Osmanthus memories than you have, so I'll throw in a little taste of his mentality. Yaren's desire to kill the weeping dragon sharpened as though honed on a whetstone. She could feel Osmanthus' lethal will inside her, conveyed from Dross's memories. When he wanted to kill, that desire was honed to a perfect edge. The arrogance she had been feeling, the position of an executioner, suddenly fit. All her powers, her mind, and her stance were in unity, inside and outside. Something echoed, deeper than physical reality, as she swung her sword in a slash, the Reaper's sword. And she pushes against the dread god's Madra and stands her ground. And the upper body of the weeping dragon is pushed back. It stopped itself, and so did she, in the air. She floated with nothing but her will. And that's pretty impressive. Like, this is no longer Wind Madra manipulation. It's just her being like, I can fly. And then she does. And the remnants are above her, shielding her. And she is also basically sucking them dry as well, which is a weird combo. The storm sage is yelling, I have defied the Great One. My defiance is my tribute. Yushi's spirit was more cooperative. We will cover you until we break. Yushi, why can't more people be like you? Fucking storm sage. God damn it. You are so annoying. Get a life. So it says the weeping dragon moved its attention to the side, and she didn't need Dross's warning to know what the dread god sensed. Someone had drawn a weapon powerful enough to threaten its life. Mercy held the silent king bow. So then we jump into Mercy's POV. And she's holding this thing and is like, I cannot believe Lindon used this fucking thing. She's just like having to draw a lot on the authority from the book, because without it, just on her own, it's simply not going to happen. Like, it is really, really heavy. And the whole point was, you know, we'll give this to you when you're ready. She's just not there yet, though. She's not actually ready. So she has to do it before she's ready, which just feels like the order of the day for literally everybody. Is just, it would have been nice if we could have waited till you were ready, but nope, gotta just do it now. So let's see. She had to pick up the arrow. One penance arrow had fallen at her feet. She touched it, and death flashed through her body like dark lightning. Not pain, death. And she is pulling her concentration, thinking about how much she hates this dragon and wants to erase it. And then she's like, I don't know. That's just not really the vibe. I'd like something different. And so she decides to go in a different direction, and instead, this is a necessary death. We're cutting out a cancer. We are the ruler, so let's defend our subjects. This isn't an act of malice. It is an act of mercy. And she feels the change in her power and is suddenly like, oh, shit, okay. Like, it's not easier, but it feels like it's not her mom's, at least. You know, it's her own power now. It's not her just trying to imitate her mom. And she pulls the string back, and spoilers, she misses, which is just so unfair. It's not her fault. The whole thing is just, it's so devastating. She pulls the string back, she releases the arrow, and she blacks out. Her last thought before she passed out was confidence that someone would save her, which is just wonderful. I love that line so much because having that kind of deep faith in her friends, especially, you remember where we were coming from with Mercy on the last book. Her mother had gotten into her head so bad in terms of convincing Mercy that her friends were all conspiring. You know, she didn't feel anything like this. And now she's like going unconscious in the middle of a dread god battle. And it's just like, it'll be fine. Which, that's wild. Like, what a great place to be. I love this for her. So we go back to Yaren. And she saw that Mercy unleashed the penance arrow. And let's see, Yaren didn't know who held the edge in the contest, but the Dread God's focus on penance pulled pressure away from its claw. She shoved it aside. Red essence sprayed from a crack in her sword. Not a good sign. Netherclaw was breaking down. And later on, Lindon is looking at it and thinking, like, maybe I can repair it. There's nothing that he can do that aligns with the void icon, though. Every time he tries to think of a way to, like, phrase the request, basically, of authority to make it whole again, it just is him wanting for something to be added, for it to be, you know, that it's the opposite of what the icon means. And I'm assuming he is, like, planning on figuring something else out, but it doesn't seem like Netherclaw is necessarily going to be the weapon she's got going forward. So let's see. Dross, I love when he's like, so I know that you want to use that technique again, but, like, you can't just keep doing that, right? And she says, I know the sword can't take it. And he's like, yeah, okay, no, though. Like, yeah, but no, you can't take it, bitch. Okay? Can you please come back down to planet Earth? I understand that you are idolizing this guy and that you are trying to do what he does. But the thing is, you can't exactly. You sort of can, and a little, and you're just pushing it way too hard. And when she tells Dross, I can't even feel it, he's like, yeah, see, that's the part. That's what's making me, I don't like it. Let's see. Penance finally tore through the lightning, but the Dread God's attack still deflected the arrow. Instead of shooting down the Weeping Dragon's throat, it blasted off to the side. Harmless. That sucks. And, like, granted, she was a distraction. It really did help Yaren's attack for Mercy to be drawing him, but it's like, what a fucking letdown, truly. And I don't know if Penance, if the arrow is still whole by the end of this battle. I'm assuming that it is, and they can potentially still use it. It doesn't, the Weeping Dragon doesn't get authority over it and crush it the way it did the other one, if I remember. So it begins to slam down onto Yaren and attempt to crush her. And she is just like, Jesus, because she felt like she was able to withstand some shit. But once this particular attack begins, she starts to go, oh, right, a dread god. I forgot. It's like all of her begins to kind of shut down. Her bones are breaking. One of her arms, she straight up cannot feel. Her vision is beginning to go. The remnants she'd stolen made it over to her. They had largely fallen apart, losing their shape, but they still focused their remaining power and will into a shining storm protecting her overhead. She fed on them, forcing her body back into shape. Another lightning-sheathed claw fell. She attacked it with a slash of Madra. Her world narrowed, and that was all she did. She swung her sword at the claw that fell. Yeren, you've got to run! Yeren! But his voice just fades, and she just keeps doing what she's doing. And I'm like, that is just so Yeren. That's so Yeren. Her being just like, I will take it under advisement and ignore it. That is what advisement told me to do. So now we go to Zeil. And he is, trying to chip in, for lack of a better way of putting it. In the fight, he's not coming front and center, but whenever he sees openings that are made by the others, he takes them. And the fucking arrow, he sees it miss, and he is just like, that's it. Oh my God. We failed. That's it. And Dross is like, no. Oh my God, that's right. I forgot about this. I was asking what happened to the arrow. I forgot Dross has him grab it. And it's just like, don't actually touch it because that could definitely kill you. Just grab it. And he tries to forge all of these rings around it to catch it. And it just keeps breaking them. And he's doing this in the midst of still watching the fight. He felt the arrow finally crawl to a stop in one of his script circles. Dross, can you show me what to do? Well, not exactly. I'm not as powerful as I was in my original body. I can guess. Okay, don't tell me how likely this is, just help me. Which I do love that because it feels like, when C-3PO always is insisting on saying the odds of this working are 276,392 to 1. It feels like kind of him just being like, hey, don't do that thing. Just don't say it, please. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. And Dross is like, I don't get it. Everybody is over here just being like, I guess I'll die. And I am trying so hard to make it that you don't die. And nobody's listening. You just all are insisting on just fucking dying. And Zeil says, yeah, well, how many lives is it worth to take down a dread god? And he's not wrong. If you're going to go down, this is the fucking way. So he's got penance. It says the power of the penance arrow had already numbed his hand. His hand might have died, but he didn't care. At least his grip hadn't loosened. And the idea that his hand died, I was very upset. You guys, I don't like it. So let's see. All his will and Madra soulfire went into this one technique. A massive shield appeared. Beneath him, the weeping dragon was approaching rapidly as he fell. It looked like he was falling into a vast river of sapphire scales. With force aura, he pried open his dead fingers and released the white arrow with the gleaming black arrowhead. It fell next to him and focused his attention on the arrow. This dread god was the cause of endless suffering, all the pain he'd ever felt in his life, all the lives taken. They found their target. So he just decides that what I'm going to do is frame this like I am protecting other people by taking this thing down in order to get it to align with the shield icon. And the shield icon is like, bet, let's do it. and he uses the arrow. I don't know how I forgot that this is how he does this. I just keep insisting on picturing Zeil fighting with his hammer. And even when this is not what's happening, because the hammer would not do this job, I like somehow transpose that mentally. And I've read this twice, you guys. Instead of a moving point, it looked like a burning white line connecting earth and heaven, a line that pierced the dread god down the middle. Zeil slammed into the weeping dragon's skin, and bones snapped, but his body was sturdy now. He sank his fingers into the scales. Tough, sharp edges cut him down to the bone. "I killed you," Zeil shouted. "Me!" I don't think it can hear you, Dross pointed out. You guys, I was so afraid because, he had that moment with the Storm Sage where he's like, "I want you to know who did this to you." And then the Storm Sage suddenly started to fight back and be much more effective against him. And so I was genuinely like, if this bitch is too busy going, "I killed you," and then this thing manages to get back just enough juice to pop him in the mouth, I'm going to be oh so upset. But that is thankfully not what happens. So, Weeping Dragon, dead, gone. Chapter 20. Akura Malice. Just out here watching the fight against the Weeping Dragon. Not helping, not doing shit. Because she is trash. And as soon as it's over, she is freed from the oath that she made. And she's like, all right, here we go. Now, I thought this was interesting. The monarch walked out of shadow onto a scene of complete devastation. Malice was no stranger to Dread God battlefields. She'd created more than a few of them herself. But the objective of fighting a Dread God was usually to minimize its destruction, which often prevented the land from becoming this nightmare made manifest. From one end of the sky to the other, the earth looked as though it had been tilled by a cosmic farmer. And there's a lot of description about all of this and how, literally maps are going to have to be redrawn because of valleys just completely disappearing and, just mountains being taken out or made in new spots. And she's out here just well, at least they didn't go too much further north because that would have fucked my fortifications up. And this is a small price to pay. And is very excited because she can feel that Lindon is on the verge of death. Now, I am concerned at this point. As I have said, as a reader, I'm like, yo, what the fuck happened? We jumped to everybody else handling the Dread God all well and good, but Lindon fell out of the sky, and now here's Malice sneaking up on him. What the hell? And I didn't even think of this part. It says, if he died, he would pass his power to the other Dread Gods. And I was like, huh. Oh, okay. Now you would think that line would have clued me in to what happens later. But I will freely admit it didn't. I wasn't paying enough attention. We'll get to that though. So she is reaching out with shadows and she creeps up on everybody. And as soon as she is able to summon her bow, she aims at Yeren and looses the arrow. And this is amazing. The arrow is flying, and Yeren is so deeply fucked up that there's no way Malice doesn't kill her. Malice shifted her attention to Zeil. She felt the change in fate too late. Malice's arrow was already in the air when the Dread God breathed its last. Hunger aura erupted out of the weeping dragon, empowering the last 3 dread gods, the wandering titan, the bleeding phoenix, and the one she'd named herself, the empty ghost. And I was like, oh, wow, he gets a power up from this fucking death too. I know that he keeps being called a baby dread god, basically, but I keep thinking about that sheerly in terms of the power, not in terms of the function of him in this ecosystem and the interaction between him and the other dread gods. And I shouldn't be making that mistake. Like I said, it's been mentioned a few different places, the way that the dread gods work and the connection that he has and everything. But I just am not seeing him that way. It's just not computing in my little brain. So every time there's another development like this, I'm genuinely taken off guard. Malice saw where her arrow would pierce Yaren's chest only a split second before Lindon awakened. His first sight would be what Malice had done. She didn't see any further in fate than that. Her future cut off at that moment. I love that so much. He doesn't have to say, here's how he attacks her. He doesn't have to say anything. It's just he sees her, and that's the end. That's it. That's a wrap. So she clicks the undo button many, many times. She is keyboard mashing. Escape, escape, escape. And I don't know how many of you guys have ever seen Gravity Falls. So good, by the way. But there is an episode where this dude is trying to learn how to date. And he was learning at first via a video game. And there were times where you could click undo if you fucked up. So he goes out into the real world and he's like using some of the weird lines from the game on real women. And then realizes at one point that he has offended this lady and says undo out loud. And the woman says to him, "You can't undo who you are," which is the most devastating thing I have ever heard. And in the scene, it's like so out of proportion how serious she is compared to like the scenario. But her being like, "No, I take it back." I just wanted to be like, Malice, this is who you are. You can't undo who you are. But she does. She has to pull it back. And just as she does that, power erupts from Lindon. And he floats into the air and is just sucking all the aura out of the like surrounding area. The weeping dragon's sky dispersed and the sky turned black. And I was like, oh no. Oh, Malice, this is really bad for you, babes. Get out of here. You should run. She doesn't, because she's like, if I run, he's going to notice me. She's like doing if I stay right in the center of his head and slow down like he's a fucking T-Rex or something. When she sensed that power coming from Lindon, she felt like a young woman catching a glimpse of the dread gods for the first time. It was an overwhelming power. She was not used to being outclassed. So what does fucking Malice do now? You know what she does? Does she go, maybe I should just sit on my hands and wait until it's safe to bounce? No, she does not. She's like, well, at least I'm going to take Mercy. I'm not going to fuck with Orthos and Little Blue because they're bonded to Lindon and maybe that will set him off. He'll notice. But Mercy, I don't think that's going to be an issue. I'll go ahead. And she's reaching out to Mercy. And then all of a sudden, Lindon disappears. And appears again on the back of the weeping dragon and digs his hand in and just begins to consume. There was a core binding somewhere inside the dread god's length, but monstrous power threaded through its every inch. Lindon devoured it mindlessly, driven by his own arm. She sensed no conscious thought in him, only hunger. And I'm really, curious, when we go to Lindon's POV, he doesn't reference this scenario. And I really wonder if he remembers any of it. There's no indication yet. So I'll be curious to see. So Mercy's body slides into the shadow and into her void space. And then she looks up again, and once again, Lindon is gone. And she's like, how the fuck is he gone? He is so saturated with power. There's no way that I don't notice him moving around, and yet I don't know where he is. And then all of a sudden, he's beneath her. And she's just like, Jesus Christ, what the fuck is he doing? This is so creepy, you guys. He still wasn't fully awake. White fingers twitched like someone was trying to puppeteer him. His arm lunged to the ground, dragging his shoulder with it. Then he punched into her shadow. Malice felt the intrusion into her void space. She could work her will against it if she chose. Instead, she stayed very, very still. Good call. The fact that this thing is just dragging his ass around. Is Dross awake? I can't tell. I feel like this is happening fully without Lindon or Dross's participation. They are just along for the ride, and the arm is 100% driving the boat. And I don't know if that's true, but that's the vibe. So, if it is, that's fascinating. Because it punches into the void space, grabs Mercy by the wrist, pulls Mercy out, and then sits her on the ground. And then Lindon slowly seems to come back into focus, begin to become conscious again. She had expected that he was going to consume Mercy. And I really do just want to point out that Malice was going to allow that to happen. She was going to let Lindon eat her daughter in front of her just because she wanted to save her own life. Which, ew, I hate you. But also, the fact that the arm, if it's functioning without Lindon's control, is aware of Mercy enough to be like, oh, we need to keep her here. Why? That's fascinating to me. How is the arm... how does that work? You know what I'm saying? So he begins to focus on her, and she immediately jumps into the way and is really worried that he is going to follow her. She jumps in and it's just like, oh, Jesus Christ, I'm going onto a different continent. Straight up out of here. And it doesn't follow. After consuming one dread god, Lindon had grown powerful enough to threaten her and defend his labyrinth against multiple monarchs, but not enough to kill one outright. Now that he'd fed on a second, he could have forced the issue and killed her. She was certain of it. And she's just like, oh, fucking Christ. There's two other ones. If he eats their power, that's a fucking wrap. That's it. It's curtains. And I am stoked. I can't wait. So, Lindon, back conscious. We are with him in his head. And he is trying to figure out who to cope with first, because everybody is in bad shape. Zeil, in particular, very close to death. He would have died already if it hadn't been for Orthos and Blue, handling him. And he is tearing open a portal. So he is like, all right, I'm going to go through and I'm going to tell the labyrinth what I need. So he starts to walk through, and it's like there. It says it felt like he was trying to walk through a flexible fabric. I keep picturing like walking up to a door, a back door that's got a screen over it, and you're just like walking against it. And it turns out that because he has absorbed so much power, he is basically metaphysically dense in a way that he can't use portals anymore. It doesn't work for him. The only way he can do it is the way that dread gods have, where you can exchange with another being of equal weight and switch spots. But otherwise, sorry. Which, that's sort of fascinating, because that means that he could technically like move a dread god somewhere else. And I don't know if it has to like agree for that to work. If they have to be like, if it has to be a cooperative thing. But it would be cool if that weren't necessary and he could just be like, come here. And the only thing be, then he'd wind up wherever it wasn't and be leaving all of his friends to deal with it, which would suck. So there's this moment too. Dross says, "You're too heavy to move." "Sorry, is it rude to say you're heavy?" another Dross asked. "Bloated," a third Dross suggested. "Bulky." "Metaphysically dense," said a red Dross. The other spirits turned and looked to him. "You don't get it, do you?" Lindon's Dross said to the red one. So the red one's personality is already changing, because all the others are like in concert, and this Dross, Yaren's Dross, is more serious. It feels like he's already like attempting to just be like correct. He's not playful. I don't know. That's interesting to me, and also again worrying. Just saying. So let's see. This is when he begins to, first he calls Windfall to him, and he is expecting it to like fly toward him, and it just appears directly above his head, and it took almost no effort, and he's just like, wow, that's kind of cool. Shit, I didn't really expect that kind of forward movement. Okay, nice. He flew Yaren up to the highest room in Windfall, though a good quarter of its roof was still missing, and laid her on the couch, then continued with Mercy and Zeil. He had to be most careful with Zeil, balancing him on a smaller 1,000-mile cloud while Orthos and Little Blue kept him stabilized. And this is when he asks Dross, how close was it? And at first, several times, Dross is like, I am not going to tell you. You don't need to think about that. Just don't think about that. And Lindon's like, no, for real. How close was it? And finally, Dross is like, if the dragon had died literally a second later, Zeil would be dead. 5 more seconds, Yaren would be dead. Mercy would be gone. And I'm like, gone, like dead also? Why did he say gone? Like, what does that mean? If Zeil's strike had missed, they would all be dead. If you hadn't dropped a penance arrow where you did, you would be dead. The dragon would have eaten you. And Lindon is just like, wow, I can't believe that we scraped that close. Like, there was literally a second and we would have actually lost somebody. And this is fascinating. Dross is like, I know what you're thinking. You are thinking that you're going to fight by yourself, that you shouldn't have brought them with you this far. And Lindon says, no, I'm not. And he lets Dross into his thoughts, which he has to apparently consciously do now because of the Dread God power. It's apparently making it a little more opaque in his head. And it says, Athan had descended from the heavens in search of companions. Suriel didn't fight alone, and she had encouraged him to seek out Yaren and to fight alongside the others. Clearly, no amount of power was worth moving forward alone. I just love this. I truly do. Just being like, it, like, no matter what, as a group, that's it. It's like no compromising, no, I'm going to be the one that sacrifices forever. Like, no, it's all of us or none. I'm bored says taken by malice. Oh, okay. So Mercy wouldn't have died. She would just have, like, with everybody else out of the way, Malice would have been able to just swoop in. I got you. And then we have a lovely line, which I appreciated, was highlighted by like 500 people. Dross says, it's every parent's dream to see their little boy grow into such a fine young dread god. You're not my parent. Well, I don't like your parents, so I choose to replace them. Amen, Dross. Appreciate you, bud. This really got me thinking, actually, because you guys know how delighted and tickled I was at the way that Fisher Gesha reacted to Lindon's dad. It made me sort of wonder if Lindon's parents are, like, notorious, because everybody knows Lindon. He's famous now. Is everybody aware that Lindon's parents, like, fucking failed him? Do they know how completely useless they were? I really wonder if they have, like, a bad reputation, or if just the fact that they are his parents means that they get respect because that's the default, you know? I have to assume they're, like, safe in that way because of who he is, but probably people, like, kind of look at them sideways, you know? Just sort of an interesting question. And I mean, his mom is trying. Like, his parents were super trash. I'm not trying to, like, defend them exactly, but I will say that his mother seemed more willing than his father to listen and extend some, and keep her mind open, you know? But nevertheless, I mean, yeah, shit went the way it went. I'm just saying. So, let's see. Lindon is deciding that he is going to attempt some healing. And he uses the void icon and is just, like, basically telling wounds, leave, get out of here. And they do. They don't fade away. They just stop being, which is awesome. So he works on her Madra channels and whatnot, and manages to do a lot of healing with Mercy. And then Zeil, he manages a lot of work on Zeil. But then Yeren, nothing he does is quite effective. And he starts to see that the Weeping Dragon attacked her, and in order to undo what it has done, Lindon would have to match its authority and focus and will. And Dross is trying to be like, dude, she will heal. Just leave it. Let her be. And Lindon's just completely ignoring him, as usual. By the time Yeren's wounds had lessened and her breath rose and fell evenly, Lindon was covered in sweat and his own breaths were ragged. In terms of his willpower, he traded another series of blows with the Weeping Dragon after the fight was over. And I was like, God damn, this dude cannot get a break. So all of them are asleep, and he is looking at Netherclaw and trying to consider ways to fix it. Dross keeps being like, just do soul smithing. That's the only way. Like, you're not going to be able to manage this. And he at first intends to once again ignore Dross, but then reconsiders and is like, all right, yeah, you know what? That's fair. I definitely should just do it the normal way. And then it's time to consider what they're going to do with the Weeping Dragon's binding. So he pulls this bitch out, and it says it had been larger than a house, but Lindon had compressed it down when he put it in his spirit. Physical size for purely spiritual items was largely a matter of choice, which is so crazy sounding to me. Larger than a house. I mean, it makes sense because the size of the dragon, like, I genuinely can't even comprehend. I try and imagine what the dragon looks like, and I just think Godzilla. You know, that's all I think is Godzilla, and that's not adequate at all. This is so much bigger. But my brain just can't really process that. You know, it just doesn't. So at first he's like, this would make a dope-ass launcher. But the thing that they come up with that would be super, super powerful would take a ton of Madra. It would need to be left to rest for a couple minutes between shots. And probably using it a couple of times or 3 times would break it. And what Lindon wants is a weapon that will be able to come with them when they ascend. So he doesn't want something that's going to, like, either break right away or he has to do maintenance on it in between uses, which is not ideal. And there's a joke here where he's thinking about maybe using it as a spear. I wasn't thinking it was for me. Oh, are you planning on resurrecting Zeil? Dross paused with a tendril beneath his chin. Was that too soon? No, I feel like it wasn't soon enough. How dare you? Okay, well, have some fucking respect. I get so mad. Oh, so rude. So he says something about, like, making a thing for Larian, and Dross is like, the fuck you are. Absolutely not. Oh my God. If you use this and then just hand that weapon to her, I will fucking haunt you. That is it. I'll haunt you both. So then Lindon's like, well, but it is going to be for Zeil. So it should be a hammer. And I immediately was like, ooh, I don't feel like Zeil's going to want that, bro. Like, I just had a feeling that's not how he rolls. Like, there will definitely be people who are, you know, certain personalities are going to be like, ha, yeah, I finally fucking killed you, and now I'm going to make you my bitch by turning you into a dope-ass weapon that's going to make me so fucking strong, and fuck you. And that's just not how Zeil rolls. Like, it doesn't feel like him to me. So I immediately thought, I hope you don't just do that without checking, dude, because I don't see it. And Dross points out that his Madra isn't super compatible with it. Like, he's going to need to figure out a way to use it, but also be forging scripts at the same time. It'll be difficult. And also, the monster, like, destroyed his home. Isn't that kind of in bad taste? Lindon says he slayed the monster that destroyed his original sect, made its body into a weapon, and turned that weapon against its brothers. That doesn't sound like bad taste. It sounds like the makings of a legend. To which Dross finally says, he admits, all right, look, the truth is, I just don't want it to be a fucking hammer. That sucks. There's so much cool shit with this binding, and a hammer, you can't use like half of it. I don't like it. So, he senses, Lindon does, that Zeil has awakened. And he goes and talks to him and starts to talk about the binding, and Zeil immediately says no. And Lindon finally says, okay, I mean, I won't push it, but, like, why not? And Zeil says, I'm not using that power. I won't do it. I'm free of it now. Would you object to a hammer made from the Wandering Titan? Make it a shield, Zeil said. Lindon returned to the Soul Forge with less direction than before. I did kind of like that. He has all these plans, and then everybody's just like, or what if we didn't do the thing you wanted? I do enjoy, though, Dross at one point when he says the hammer from the Wandering Titan, he's like, slow down, bud. We need to get that before we start thinking through what we're going to make out of it. I'm just kidding. I definitely already have like a schematic, a full-on schematic. I have it all planned out. It's great. But the fact that Zeil is then like, shield, please. I guess Dross is going to have to come up with a new idea. So Lindon's pretty stoked because obviously the bow that he made with the Silent King's binding is not meant for him. It's obviously meant for Mercy. And that means that because Yaren's not compatible, the Bleeding Phoenix would be the only thing that you could really use for Yaren, and Zeil doesn't want it. It's really left to Lindon. Like, Orthos and Little Blue are not quite able, like, at a point where they could use their authority over something like this yet. So he pulls out Wave Dancer. And I had been thinking about this weapon, actually, but I kind of let it go. I almost thought something happened to it and I had forgotten, because it just sort of vanished. And I appreciate Dross saying, we never gave you the attention you deserved, did we? And I don't know if this is like Will White admitting that, or if this was part of his plan overall, or what. But this is it's just a flying sword. It doesn't have a binding, and it is extremely strong, but it doesn't have bells and whistles, right? And let's see. Dross says, obviously, these materials will explode if you try to put the Weeping Dragon's binding inside. We'll be borrowing its form, structure, and significance, and we'll have more than enough excess materials. I have an idea for that. Can you model it for me? Dross saw Lindon's idea, and his purple eye lit up. You see? Isn't that way more fun than a hammer? And that is the end of the chapter. I am dying to know what it is. I had thought he was going to go back to the launcher construct idea. And I am a big fan of that. Like, the launchers are so bonkers, and especially because, you guys, my favorite launcher still is the one that he constructs incredibly quickly in the middle of a conversation with, I can't remember what her name is, but she is one of the Akuras, I think, or maybe not, but it's when he's getting points, and it's supposed to be the whole group going over to like handle some cave, I think. And he basically like builds a launcher on the way, and it's this incredibly powerful thing. And she realizes that he's just got a handle on this a lot more than she expected, and tells him, you should do this more with Yaren. She would love it. And that's how I picture Lindon in my head, kind of still. Is like, that scene felt so definitively Lindon. You know, he's zeroed in, focused on his goal. He is building something like absurdly advanced, but not thinking about it that much because he doesn't have to. The person he's with doesn't fully understand what he's capable of, and is surprised at what he manages to basically pull out of his ass. And like, the whole scene just felt so Lindon. That's so Lindon. We've got that so Yaren, we've got that so Lindon. And so I kind of think of Lindon with launcher constructs now. Like, that's sort of what I picture. And I guess if we're doing a sword, I would bet there's like a launcher aspect to it somehow that he manages to, but I'm very, very unsure how that would work. So I'm pretty excited to see what they come up with. I'm very excited. So, okay, it's time for us to wrap up. I can't believe I managed this, guys. 2 chapters. Only 2. An hour of talking. I mean, I guess the breakdown that I did every day, it's showing itself more and more to be the way I need to go, but I'm still very cranky about it. Anyway, I am, once again, 2 chapters for next episode, Thursday. So thank you guys again for hanging out with me. Appreciate you all a lot. And thank you, Andy, for commissioning this. Everybody say thanks to Andy for commissioning this entire series. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.